Welcome back to part three of our mini series of the Gallaudet murders here on the True Crime Lounge podcast. I do have a Patreon that you can join for early access to episodes scheduled to come out. I also have a merch shop for all your true crime gear. For any updates on my channel or podcast, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. With that being said, why don't we dive into today's episode, shall we? Um, my DoorDash order has been picked up. Happy Memorial Day weekend to everyone too. I hope y'all all have a safe, and please remember that the judge will not be back until Tuesday. So please don't do anything stupid. Um, but let's get back into part three. We're almost done with this mini series, guys. Um, After several interviews, Mesa admitted to the crimes. To be honest with you, he said to Detective, I did it. Now the story he did told the police about the course of 4 hours in which he would later contradict somewhat what he had gone into Benjamin Vernon's room after 9 o'clock p.m. During the night of February 1st to rob him, Benjamin was there and asked Mesa if Benjamin had a checkbook. He also spotted a 4-inch paring knife next to Benjamin's microwave. Mesa had grabbed the knife and stabbed Benjamin in the back of the neck when he fell to the floor. Mesa slit his throat. He then took the checkbook. He wrote a check to himself for $650. He admitted to killing Eric Plunkett, and they both had seemed to be easy targets. When this story was not consistent with the fact that his Benjamins had been stabbed 17 times in different areas of the body, it was nevertheless clear that Mesa was telling at least parts of the truth. He was the Cogswell Hall killer. Based on his confession, the police got a warrant to search his room, now in adjacent to Krug's Hall. When he and other Cogswell residents had been moved after the murder, it was not long after that they found a pair of bloody Nikes and blood-stained clothing, in which they confiscated. They also turned up 2 credit cards after an analysis that shoes proved to be a match to the shoe print preserved outside Benjamin's room. Um, this led to a community that was in mourning. And Mesa's attorney, Ferris Bond, argued that his client should be released on his own recognizance, since he had no criminal record and no history of had a history of community service. The judge declined to allow him to go free, and he remained in jail until his preliminary hearing because of his family in Guam there was was their danger, and he might leave the country. In addition, since the evidence was substantial that he killed twice, the community's safety was foremost concern. His family was notified, and his father was utterly stunned and bewildered. His son was not a violent person, but insisted how could the charges be true? Um, all their hopes for their son had a difficult time being were dashed. The families of both victims were notified of Messer's arrest, and as the attorney for Thomas Minch, Eric's sister was horrified. Um, Sorry guys, I had to fix this order real quick. Um, but yeah, so the families of both victims were notified of Messer's arrest, as were the attorney of Thomas Minch. Um, She was horrified. She had actually seen Mesa in Eric's room one evening. She had been conversing with Eric online via live action camera, and had spotted a boy behind him, taking a videotape, and she asked who it was. Eric had assured that the boy was his friend. Only a few days later, Mesa, who admitted to out how easy it was to get across the room, killed Eric to get his credit card. Eric's sister had actually seen him engaged in pre-crime surveillance. Um, his sister Erin, now university president, um, I. King Jordan offered a statement of me. Obviously, for the Gallaudet community, there is a sense of relief that someone had been taken into custody for this terrible crime, and there was a sense of sadness. Um, At Werner's memorial service, the friends talked about how he had hoped to travel around and would make changes for the better. His mom and sister were there from San Antonio. They also said that Benjamin wanted him to forgive his killers, so they had. He also forgave the moment the life left his body. He was just pure love. Um, a few days later, Benjamin had adopted the Muslim faith after a few years earlier. He had adopted the Muslim faith. Um, as he was searching the world's religions. He observed the same vision and he applied his studies, earning a grade point average of nearly 4.0. He had tutors, others, and set a good example with his desire to learn. His mom continued to help out and remember how he cried when she brought him to school in August. He also prepared diligently and did all things, but he was close to her and told her that he would miss her. She had assured him that he would be all right, and then they both departed. Both in tears, she had heard him crying in the hallway. And he would email her every night, once mentioning that he met a boy from Guam, Joseph Messer. The parents were both victim, or the parents of both victims, overwhelmed by the inability to have protected their sons, while while they were glad for her arrest, as if it would stick. Um, it would stick. They could not feel the closure and senselessness of the killings. However, one family member was relieved. The arrest exonerated Thomas Minch, who officially was welcome to return. He declined the invitation, rightfully so, in my opinion. Now that the killer had emerged from the community, more likely, a family den with the campus's offers seemed especially whelming. It hit us when we didn't expect it, a student wrote on a reporter's pad. Students who also knew Messer could not believe the news, despite his arrest and the impending trial. One student um one told reporters that he attended high school with Messer and could not believe he was the kind of person who would kill anyone. But others said that he had often been in trouble. A former roommate had seen him swipe money from other students, but was friendly and respectful and generally considered to be a nice guy. It was clear that the students pondered a person who had vowed to dedicate himself to the death, yet had looked around for just the right person to kill and calculate a way to do it. He did not even form a plan to just rob him, and he was apparently already done without discovery. Murder had been on his mind. But Then a story emerged about his suspension from the school the year before. He had taken another student's debit card and used it several times for thousands of dollars he was allowed to return. And this would not be the only disturbing pretrial revelation. He was charged with 2 counts of felony murder. One was armed along with the robbery and burglary charges. He was held without bail for his preliminary hearing. He showed no reaction, and he was action as he was answered for charges, but left the thief in the night that he was. He had already fit make had plans to slip off his responsibility. He admitted to the robbery, but the murders had been motivated by something else. He would say he started to write down several people he believed would assist in his scheme. The trial was set for November 2001. In April, the original police investigation at the Gallaudet University took heat from reporters from the Washington Post. Um, they had tracked down the records in the arrest of Thomas Mitch to learn that the police had never considered Mesa a suspect. As it turned out, the police had missed some key evidence that would have prevented the murder of Benjamin Werner. Among the problems was the fact that Eric Plunkett's wallet had been missing from his room, which would point out to a robbery and a motive to alert police to look at his financial transactions. In fact, Eric's debit card had been used the day he died, yet no one followed up with the clue. In addition, Mesa already had hit a record debit card death, and he was alerted to the RA to the supposed odor. A basic rule of police work, apparently not followed in this case, is to check the person at the scene, the first person at the scene. The mistakes began almost immediately, and the assignment of investigators was mixed, with nearly half of his cases over 6 preceding years still unsolved and 3 arrests dismissed for lack of evidence. The police interviewed Mesa since he lived across the hall, but he did not request a background check on him, when people which would have revealed his suspension for theft. They also did not investigate the fact that his account differed from the others. No one else has smelled an odor. It is believed that he had been indicative of a person who wanted the bodies to be found. Once it was found, there was no routine inventory of Eric's room, which would have turned up the missing items. The detectives also failed to follow up the purchases made with a card, which meant that no one requested videotapes from the stores, was purchases were ever made after the tapes have been erased. Then there was the Mitch interrogation. He was then arrested for murder. Um, as soon as he admitted to hitting Eric during the argument, he did confess to murder. He did not confess, but the records indicated the interrogating detectives told his superiors that he extracted a confession. No one corroborating the evidence was nearly promotive command. There have failed to question the detective closely, as he would in the case against the boy. A new team of detectives had been assigned to the Mitch after Mitch was released, but they had accepted Mitch as the suspect, failing to look at new clues in other angles. It was a classic case of tunnel vision. No one established a timeline leading to the murder. No routine investigative. In short, there was many inexcusable errors. Now, officials would acknowledge this and say that we are accountable and that we need to do better. Now, the November trial came and went with legal delays. Judge Robert Richter ordered Mesa to undergo psychiatric examination from St. Elizabeth Hospital to assess his mental state at the time of the crimes. He was also evaluated for competency to waive his insanity defense, and that in the event of his attorney's strategy. Excuse me. The findings were due to court on February 19, 2002, and the defense knew the odds were against an acquittal, especially given the obvious and petty motive. That was impossible. But what both sides gained was a delay as the trial was further postponed. Richter ruled that Mesa would stand trial for both murders, contrary to Bond's hope they had two separate trials. Bond had attempted to suppress evidence found during the police in search of Mesa's dorm, but the judge ruled that the prosecutor um, could use the item. In the meantime, Messer had his own plans in his defense. Contrary to resisting the insanity defense, he had also the ideas of how to make it work for him. In March and April of 2002, he wrote to his girlfriend, Melanie Du Guzman, and asked her to beef up his case for mental illness with a few little lies, saying it isn't true, but I hope it works anyway. He also sent his brother-in-law in Guam to persuade to destroy evidence. Investigators who learned of these communications confiscated a series of letters, and his defense attorney moved to have them suppressed. The federal prosecution team was assisted by the U.S. Attorney Joe Brosberg and Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer M. Collins, and the argument was Mesa had methodically selected specific individuals to rob and kill so that he could purchase items for himself and his girlfriend. Bond's argument was more surprising, a lifetime of frustration, and that his inability to communicate had triggered Mesa's bad behavior. He had directions to kill in his head, not from the voices as he was hearing, but in sign language. Supposedly, two hands directed in behavior could not stop. Thus, at the time of both murders, Mesa had been found legally insane. The trial required an interpreter for Mesa, which meant that the procedure would be much longer than normal because of all the comments that had to be relayed to him. The courtroom um, windows were covered, and Mesa given a portrait for private conferences with his attorney, which had been conducted in sign language, once again was in place for the trial to commence.